But PG, I feel like, was always like, what, you're 6? Go ahead.
Someone died in the
Yes.
PG movie, and
Yeah.
then no one died in the G movie.
This is
Yeah.
beyond
I
death.
feel like back then PG-13 was, we need to make more money out of this movie.
Yeah.
And if it's
PG-13
rated
was
R,
like
no
some
worries
skin
about
was
it.
showing, but there
Where
was
they
no
swear.
full nudity.
Like,
Yeah.
ooh, there's like a couple swears.
Like it wasn't crap, it was like over that.
Yes. Ugh. Okay.
Oh boy, this is gonna be a fun video today. When I was a little kid, I was really sensitive to anything that was above the PG rating, and I would kind of refuse to go out and watch movies that were PG-13 or R-rated. And that wasn't my parents' choice. That wasn't because my parents were strict or anything. They would invite me to go out and see a PG-13 rated movie sometimes, like a Marvel movie or a DC movie, or I remember my grandparents really wanted me to see Avatar, but I wouldn't watch them because I was so sensitive to over-the-top swearing or anything sexual or anything extremely violent. I'm not like that anymore, of course. I'm an adult, but back then I was really sensitive. That could have something to do with my Asperger's. Who really knows? That just wasn't my thing. It wasn't until I was about like 10 or 11 when I started watching like more mature content. But when I say mature content, I don't mean like one innuendo that happens in like an entire movie. I don't mean like one image of a gun or like one gunshot that happens in an entire movie, or I don't mean anything that's only slightly violent. I mean like something that just isn't subtle about a sexual thing that happens in a film. Repeatedly swearing in an entire film, or something that's like excessively violent in a film. That's what I'm talking about. That's the kind of stuff I was sensitive with when I was a little kid watching. That's the stuff that I would always avoid. With that being said, okay, why the hell is something as innocent as Inside Out rated PG? Why does that require parental guidance? There's like literally nothing bad that happens in that film. There's no risk at all that's going on in that film. Some people will argue that it's not even that good. I think it's decent, but it's so innocent. Is it because Bing Bong vanishes and essentially dies? There's been death in other G-rated movies. The Lion King showed like an actual death along with the body that was in that film. Again, rated G. You know, it's funny because the live-action Lion King is rated PG, even though it's basically the exact same movie. Ralph Breaks the Internet. Why is that PG? Is it because they mentioned the dark web? Was there an innuendo that seemed harmful towards children? The Toy Story films did that, and they took, like, pride into having the G rating. They still do that. Toy Story 4 had the G rating in it. But, you know, there's adult jokes in Toy Story. Some of my favorite adult humor in children's media comes from the Toy Story movies.
Excuse me, I think the word you're searching for is Space Ranger.
The word I'm searching for, I can't say, because there's preschool toys present.
In my opinion, a hard PG, or like an actual PG movie, is the type of film that has risks. There's so many animated movies these days, almost all of them from the 2010s. They're all rated PG, even though in a lot of them there's nothing wrong with them. Why is Boss Baby rated PG? Why is Madagascar 3 rated PG? Why is any Illumination movie rated PG? There's nothing wrong with these movies. There's innuendo, like tiny, super, like not even, there's tiny, extremely subtle innuendo that like not even the adults catch up on because it's just so utterly subtle that kids aren't going to understand it. You know, like those Toy Story jokes that I just said, I wouldn't have gotten that when I was a little kid. Why are these movies rated PG? Okay, and yes, there are labels to the PG rating, but anytime I look at the labels for the PG rating in movies like Inside Out, Inside Out, by the way, is rated PG because of thematic elements. Okay, I looked up thematic elements on Wikipedia, like the definition, and it says thematic elements is a term used by the Motion Picture Association of America and other film rating boards to highlight elements of a film that do not fit the traditional categories such as violence, sex, drug use, nudity, and language, but may involve some degree of objectionable content. This rating reason raises a warning to parents and guardians to learn more about a film before they allow their children to view it. The thematic elements may include abortion, addiction, autism, child abuse, corruption, coming-of-age issues, crime, death, defiance, disability, discrimination, disease, driving under the influence, dysfunctional families, dystopian societies, disasters, extensional crises, hate, hazing, homelessness, gambling, infidelity, miscarriage, mental illness, politics, poverty, religion, self-harm, social issues, STDs, teenage pregnancy, verbal abuse, war, and other serious subject matter or mature discussions that some parents and guardians may feel not appropriate for their young children. Alright, some of these I do understand, and honestly think that, like, a lot of these subjects are kind of above the PG, like abortion, child abuse, STDs, teenage pregnancy, miscarriage. Okay, I can understand why those would be not suitable for children. So some of these other ones I do too, but there are a lot of them on here that I don't think are worth the PG rating. For example, disabilities, autism. I have autism, by the way. Gambling, homelessness, hate, dysfunctional families, death, defiance, coming of age issues. That's a really weird one to put on there. I guess that, like, if there was an extreme degree of this, yeah, maybe that could be worth the PG. And when I say hate, like, I understand that there's, like, hateful ideologies that are really horrible, but hate is still a really subjective word. And when someone has control over that, the word hate, you never know what they're going to end up censoring or slapping the PG on. They might think that the word idiot is just a really hateful thing to say, so then they'll end up saying, oh, that's hate, slapping the PG on there, when really that's not something that concerning. But I know why Inside Out has the PG rating now after reading this. It's because of the family arguing, and the scene where Riley runs away, or attempts to run away, and how she grows up as a kid. You can't isolate those subjects to children. You can't keep them away from reality. That's why I don't really like strict parents. That's also why I don't like censorship to a certain degree. Because, I mean, like, excessive censorship. Because you just can't isolate subjects like that to children. I always hated it when I had friends that had parents who would just isolate them from so many things. I knew kids that weren't allowed to watch SpongeBob because of its crude and rude humor, but they were allowed to play games like Halo and Call of Duty because I guess parents are okay with that. I don't know why. And usually what happens when you isolate your kids from these subjects, they start to question what's right and what's wrong because they see other kids their age looking at this stuff, getting into PG rated films. I used to know people who were only allowed to watch G rated films, by the way, when I was little too. And they're going to think, why can't I do that? And they're going to start acting defiant. I don't think any kid who wasn't allowed to watch a show like SpongeBob, like I just said, I don't think any of those kids are thankful for their parents not allowing them to watch that. At least when they grow up as an adult. Like, if I wasn't allowed to watch an innocent show, or a not really that bad of an influence show, like SpongeBob as a little kid, I wouldn't grow up and be like, man, I am really glad my parents didn't let me watch that when I was little. Because that's just ridiculous. That's not doing anything to help improve your childhood. I can say thank you, mom and dad, teachers, and all these other figures I had in my life for telling me, hey, discrimination is wrong. Hey, some people have disabilities. Hey, these are the bad things that could happen when you run away from home. Hey, this is what happens when you're defiant. You know, life lessons like that are extremely important, even in early childhood. So I don't think subjects like that, at least when it's not to an extreme, like for example, I don't think Inside Out does it to an extreme. It's teaching a valuable lesson in that film. I don't think that's worth the PG. I think kids need to learn about subjects like that. And some of you might disagree with me on this, but I do think you should teach your kids about death at a young age. Again, if it's an extreme death, or if it's like some gruesome death, yeah, you should probably give that the PG. But if it's like The Lion King, where, yeah, it is a sad death, but there's not like anything gory happening, you don't see the violence in that death, then that is worth the G rating. If there's a lesson about that, that is worth the G rating. In my opinion, the PG rating, hard PG, like movies that just recently came out like Sonic the Hedgehog, Detective Pikachu, Spider-Verse, Rango, Adventures of Tintin, Shrek, those films, in my opinion, are what PG actually is. It is a risk. There is a reason why you need parental guidance in those films, because there's swearing, because there's a little bit of violence. I mean, when I say swearing, I don't mean like a whole bunch of swearing. I mean just like a little bit of swearing. There's some violence that happens in those films. Spider-Verse even has a little bit of gun violence. It doesn't have to be like a whole bunch of stuff, like all of those elements like overly emphasized, but like I can understand why those movies are PG. PG is not Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs 2, where, I don't know, why is that film rated PG? Is it because the giant spider burger, is that gonna scare kids? I just find it so ridiculous. Is the Lego movie rated PG because a Lego character's head gets cut off? That's kind of funny because, I mean, like, if I grab a Lego minifigure and I take the head off of it, does that mean that what I'm looking at is PG material? I mean, kids do that all the time. I'm assuming it's PG because of that one scene with the dad and the child, which I, again, think is dumb. I don't think that's worth a PG. Or, I don't know, maybe it's even to the point where if a character falls, you automatically get a PG. I don't know why Toy Story 4 gets the G. Maybe companies are purposely putting the PG on these movies when really they actually got a G rating from the FCC. And I don't know, the PG might look more attractive than a G. I don't know. One last thing I want to talk about is that I know that the rating system has changed for several decades. There's movies like The Goonies and E.T., a lot of 80s movies that have the PG, and those movies had a lot of stuff that they would not get away with in a PG film nowadays. And PG-13 used to also be pretty hard back in the 80s. It used to be pretty intense. Airplane, I saw the movie Airplane recently. That is definitely not something that would be called PG nowadays. There's literal nudity in that film. There's nudity in The Goonies too. They joke around about a statue's dick. I don't mind some regulation, but it's gotten to the point where just G can't really exist anymore. I don't know how Toy Story 4 got the G rating, but there's so many animated films these days that just, it's not worth giving the PG. But anyway, this is all just my opinion. If you think the rating system is fine, tell me why. If you think there's a flaw in this video, I'd also like to hear why. I love constructive criticism. But with all of that being said, I am Stir, and like always, I don't know how to end videos.